Halloween night, 1963. At the Myers house, Judith Myers is spending the night with her boyfriend Daniel Hodges having fun. They both go from the living room to Judith's room upstairs where Michael Myers, who's wearing a clown costume, enters the house. He goes to the kitchen, getting a butcher knife out of the drawer. He then hides until he sees Daniel leave. Michael then walks upstairs, finding a discarded clown mask on the floor. He picks it up and puts it on his head. He walks into Judith's room, who's brushing her hair in front of a mirror, and Judith notices him and yells "Michael!" as Michael walks towards her and eventually stabs her. Not just once, but multiple times. She falls out of her chair and onto the bedroom floor where she dies. Michael walks out of the room, down the stairs, and quickly out of the house. However, Mr. and Mrs. Myers arrive home, finding Michael holding the knife in his hands now covered in blood. Mr. Myers pulls the mask off of Michael's head to see his face. Little did they know at this point that Michael had killed Judith, but he knew exactly what he had just done as he stares off into nothingness on this unforgettable Halloween night. 15 years later, it's a rainy day as Dr. Samuel Lewis and nurse Marion Chambers drive to Smith's Grove Sanitarium as they are in charge of transferring their patient from the hospital, the now 21-year-old Michael Myers, who hadn't spoken at all in 15 years, to the Hardin County Courthouse so he can stand trial for his awful crimes. Loomis and Marion talk, and Loomis warns Marion about how dangerous a psychopath that is Michael Myers truly is. Loomis never wants Michael to leave the sanitarium, saying he should spend the rest of his years there. Although as they approach the main gate, they notice several of the patients outside wandering around in the rain. Loomis gets out of the car to check the gate, leaving Marion by herself. Michael Myers is able to leap on top of Marion's car, eventually reaching inside to grab her, and in fear, Marion accidentally drives around in the vehicle. She brings it to a sudden stop, but as Michael continues to torment her, she exits the car. Michael jumps inside the car and drives off, free at last. In the town of Haddonfield, Illinois, high school student Laurie Strode leaves her house to begin walking to her local school. Her father, a realtor, asks her to drop a key off at the Myers house due to it being sold sometime soon. Along the way, Tommy Doyle approaches her. A young boy Laurie babysits often and is organized to look after him tonight. As they walk a strange way, Tommy asks her a bunch of questions, but eventually Laurie arrives at the Myers house to drop off the key. Tommy tells her that it's a spook house, but she denies this and slips the key through the mail slot of the house. Unknowingly to her, as she walks away, someone is inside the house staring at her through the window. Laurie doesn't notice the stranger as she keeps walking, but the stranger continues to watch her as she walks her way to school. At Smith's Grove, Loomis argues with the hospital's administrator, Terrence Wynn. He blames Terrence for the catalyst that led to allowing Michael to escape. Wynn doesn't understand how he could have orchestrated that sort of breakout, and that Michael doesn't even know how to drive a car due to his confinement. Loomis replies that he was driving perfectly fine when he escaped, but he thinks he knows exactly where Michael is going, and that's to Haddonfield, where his childhood home stands. At Haddonfield High School, Laurie continues her school day, looking outside only to see a man in a mask standing next to a car. Her gaze is interrupted by a teacher, and when she looks back, the men in the car are both gone. Elsewhere at the elementary, a group of bullies bully Tommy. They circle him and begin chanting that the boogeyman is coming to get you. Tommy tries to run away but falls and smashes his pumpkin he was holding. The kids take off running, although one of them gets into an encounter with Michael, who after the kid runs watches Tommy from afar. Michael gets into the car he stole and watches closely where Tommy walks before driving straight past him. Outside of Haddonfield, Loomis makes a telephone call from a payphone to Sheriff Lee Brackett in Haddonfield, warning him about Michael Myers and telling him that Michael is coming to Haddonfield. Loomis hangs up the phone and walks over to a nearby empty truck, where he finds hospital robes in the bushes next to it, and on the ground lays a card with a logo of Phelps Garage, although he doesn't see the body of a dead mechanic lying in the bushes only a few feet away from the truck. Later in the afternoon, school's over, and Laurie walks with her friend Linda Vander Clock and Annie Brackett. Linda complains about her new cheers she has to learn, while Annie talks about how her boyfriend Paul dragged her into the boys' locker room. As they walk home, Laurie realizes that she forgot her chemistry book, but sees a car slowly drive by that unknowingly to them contains Michael Myers. And Annie shouts at the driver saying "Speed kills." The car stops suddenly, but then starts up again and drives off. They continue talking about what their plans are for Halloween tonight. Linda walks into her house, but as Laurie and Annie continue walking, Laurie sees a man in the mask standing behind a hedge. She's freaked out when he disappears behind the bushes. Annie didn't see him and goes to inspect the hedge, only to find nothing and no one there. Annie arrives home and Laurie keeps walking, checking behind her constantly. Laurie goes to her house and looks out her windows, seeing Michael standing in the backyard within the clotheslines. In the blink of an eye, he is gone again. The telephone suddenly rings in Laurie's room and she answers. All she hears is strange noises, so she hangs up in fear. The phone rings again, but it's confirmed to just be Annie. Annie asks Laurie why she hung up on her, and it turns out she had been simply chewing on food when she called the first time. She tells Laurie that she'll pick her up at 6:30, and at 6:30, Annie indeed picks Laurie up and they drive off. Meanwhile, Dr. Loomis arrives in Haddonfield, going to the cemetery where the graveyard keeper leads him to the grave of Judith Myers, the first kill from Michael Myers. When they get there, however, they discover that the gravestone is now missing. Loomis comes to the realization he came home. Annie and Laurie keep driving. Laurie has a pumpkin with her that she's going to give to Tommy to keep him occupied with carving jack-o'-lanterns. Annie is going to make Lindsay Wallace, who she's babysitting, sit through 6 straight hours of horror films. They keep driving, only to find Nicole's hardware store that's been broken into, where they see Annie's father, Sheriff Lee Brackett, standing outside. The alarm is ringing loudly as the sheriff explains that they only stole a Halloween mask, ropes, and knives. Annie and Laurie drive off, and only seconds later, Dr. Loomis arrives at the scene. He introduces himself to the sheriff and prepares to talk to him about Michael. As Annie and Laurie are driving, they begin talking, not knowing that Michael is following them in the stolen car. He stops when Annie drops Laurie off at the Doyle house. Annie then pulls into the Wallace house directly across the street. Michael gets out of his car and walks towards the house, watching Annie go inside and Mr. and Mrs. Wallace leave the house. Meanwhile, Dr. Loomis and Sheriff Brackett arrive at the old Myers house. They investigate, finding the partially eaten remains of a dog on the first floor. Brackett can't believe a man would do this, but Loomis reminds him that this isn't a man. They go upstairs and arrive at Judith Myers' bedroom. Loomis tells Brackett about the history with Michael Myers. He tells him how he spent 15 years studying Michael, only to determine that there was nothing inside the child's mind but pure evil. At the Doyle house, Laurie reads Tommy a King Arthur story, but Tommy says he would rather have her read comic books to him. He asks Laurie what the boogeyman is, only for Annie to call the house to see how Laurie is doing. Annie tells her that she set her up on a date with Ben Trauma, her crush. While Laurie is on the phone, Tommy looks outside and sees Michael across the street at the Wallace house. He runs to Laurie and tells her that he saw the boogeyman, but Laurie looks outside and can't see him. Annie, however, spills popcorn oil on herself and has to change clothes. Michael Myers spies on her from the outside and eventually drops a plant. The Wallace's dog Lester finds him and begins barking, but starts crying before quieting completely. Michael killed it. Elsewhere, Tommy keeps asking Laurie about the boogeyman, and she promises to keep him safe. Annie, however, is now outside, bringing her clothes to a laundry shed in the backyard. She hears the shed door suddenly creak and close, and then reopen, and she thinks that it might be her boyfriend Paul. She checks but no one's there, then continues to wash her clothes until the door shuts again. It's locked. She begins calling out to Lindsay, but she's in the main house distracted by a scary movie, and doesn't hear her. Paul calls and asks Lindsay to get Annie for her, so Lindsay hangs up on Paul and goes to find Annie. She frees Annie from the locked room, telling her that Paul called. They go back inside and Paul is ready to see her. Unknowingly to her, Michael is staring at her through the window, and he decides to take Lindsay across the street to the Doyle house to drop her off with Laurie and Tommy, but Michael is following. Laurie doesn't want to take care of 2 kids instead of just 1, but Annie promises that if she does take care of the 2, she might consider calling Ben and cancelling the date she set up for Laurie. Laurie agrees to this and Annie walks back to the Wallace house to get her car keys. She enters the garage and gets into her car, but notices how all the windows in the vehicle are suddenly completely fogged over. Michael Myers appears from the shadows and begins strangling Annie. She struggles to breathe until Michael pulls out his knife and slashes her across the throat, finishing her off. At the Doyle house, Tommy decides to play a trick on Lindsay and begins hiding behind a curtain. He looks out the window while hiding and sees Michael carrying Annie's body back into the Wallace house. He walks backwards and scares Lindsay, beginning to shout that he saw the bogeyman. Laurie runs over but calms him down, saying the boogeyman doesn't exist. Meanwhile, Dr. Loomis keeps an eye on the empty Myers house. He sees a group of kids approaching. They're daring each other to go inside the haunted house. From behind the bushes, Loomis scares them off by whispering in a scary voice, "Lonnie, get your ass away from there." The kids run, and while Dr. Loomis smiles at this, the sheriff appears and tells Loomis that he's starting to give up about the supposed threat of Michael Myers. Brackett says that if he's right and there is a slaughter, it's his fault for letting him go. Brackett walks away to keep investigating. Linda and her boyfriend Bob Sims arrive at the Wallaces in his van. They head over to Annie's house and discover that Annie's not there. They begin kissing inside the house where Michael Myers watches from the other room. Linda calls Laurie to see if she knows where Annie's gone. Laurie tells her that she's probably with her boyfriend and that she's now stuck watching Lindsay. Linda tells Bob the news about the house being empty for the night and they both go upstairs into the master bedroom. Someone calls but they ignore it. Linda asks Bob to get her a beer, so he goes and grabs her a beer, but hears the door slightly open. Michael appears and pushes Bob against the wall, choking him. Michael lifts Bob off the ground and then stabs him, pinning his body to the wall with a knife. Michael looks to his accomplishment. He then takes a bedsheet and puts it over his body. He places Bob's eyeglasses over the top of the sheet to try and fool Linda into thinking that it's actually her boyfriend. He enters the bedroom and Linda laughs. She asks for the beer that Bob was meant to get for her, but still, Michael does nothing. Linda gets up and decides to call Laurie again to find out where Annie is. As soon as Laurie picks up the phone though, Michael begins strangling Linda with a phone cord and eventually takes the sheets off as she slowly dies. Laurie puts Tommy and Lindsay to bed while outside, Loomis sees the same car that Michael stole on the street. Laurie decides to go over to the Wallace house to check up on Linda. She sees how all the lights are now off as she walks closer. She notices the door is locked, so she goes around the house, eventually finding a way inside. She hears movement upstairs and goes into the bedroom, only to find Annie's body laying across the bed, with the headstone of Judith Myers resting at the head of the bed. Laurie stumbles in fear and begins to cry. She hears something and turns around, only to see Bob's body swing at her. She runs to another wall, only to see Linda's body in a separate closet. Laurie runs into the hall, beginning to cry. Michael Myers appears from the shadow and slashes Laurie across her right arm from behind. The impact pushes Laurie forward, and she falls over the banister down the steps, cracking her ankle in the process. She runs away to the front to leave, but it's locked. So she runs to the back door, only for the handle to be blocked with a garden rake on the opposite side. Michael enters the room, and so in desperation, Laurie smashes the glass to release the handle. She manages to run outside and begins screaming for somebody to help her. She goes to the neighbor's house and begins pounding on the door, screaming for help, but they refuse to let her in, thinking it's someone pranking them this Halloween. She then rushes back to the Doyle house as Michael stalks after her. The door is locked and Laurie can't find the keys. She bangs on the door, shouting for Tommy to let her in. She throws a potted plant towards Tommy's window to wake him up. Tommy awakens, but not sensing the urgency in Laurie's voice, Tommy takes his time to go downstairs and open the door. He finally lets her in though, and Laurie tells him to lock Lindsay and himself in the bedroom upstairs. Laurie finds the phone is dead and the window is open. She grabs a knitting kettle and Michael suddenly appears in the living room. He tries to stab her, getting the knife stuck in the couch, which gives Laurie enough time to be able to stab him in the neck with a needle, knocking him down. She throws the knife away as she rests on the couch. Outside, Brackett finds Loomis, who confirms that he's close by. Laurie hobbles and hugs the kids. She tells them that there's nothing to be scared of. But the kids see Michael and scream. She quickly makes sure the kids get back into their room and then runs into the opposing bedroom where she hides in a closet. Michael comes after her and begins to try and enter the closet as Laurie cries. Michael tries to reach her, but Laurie grabs a coat hanger and hits Michael with it before he can grab her, forcing him to drop his knife. She picks it up and quickly stabs him in the stomach, causing Michael to fall. Laurie goes outside the closet and sees what she thinks is the dead man. She goes to the kids' bedroom to tell them to go down the street to the Mackenzie's house and have the adults call the police. Laurie rests against the bedroom door, but unknowingly to her, Michael rises behind her. The kids run out the house, screaming in fright. Loomis sees them flee and begins walking to the Doyle house. Laurie takes a moment to collect herself, but as she stands up, Michael Myers gets up as well. He comes up behind her and begins strangling her. Laurie is able to rip Michael's mask off, causing him to let go, and giving her a chance to see his face, before he puts the mask back on. Loomis shoots Michael away and then follows him to the other room, where he shoots him another 5 times, before Michael eventually falls over the house's balcony ledge due to the shots and lands on the ground. Laurie looks to Loomis. It was the boogeyman, to which Loomis replies, as a matter of fact, it was. Loomis looks back down over the balcony to confirm the kill, only to see that Michael is gone. Loomis stares off into the night while Laurie begins sobbing in terror due to her experience. Michael could be anywhere and could be hiding in plain sight. Or maybe he went back home. Later in the night, Hawkins spots Michael and shoots him, missing and then running after him. Other police arrive and they all decide to divide and conquer. Frank Hawkins and Pete McGabe arrive at Michael's childhood home and begin investigating the house. Michael suddenly appears and begins attacking Pete. Frank aims at Michael but accidentally shoots Pete instead. Michael leaves the building and Frank rushes to Pete. Pete asks if they got him and Frank says they did. The whole police force arrives and aims their gun at Michael Myers. They hit Michael down to the ground and prepare to execute him to finish off his reign of terror. But before Loomis executes Michael in front of his childhood home, Hawkins stops him right in the nick of time. From here, Michael is then sent to a prison where he'd spend the rest of his days, never to kill again. 40 years after the 1978 Haddonfield murders, true crime podcasters Aaron Corey and Dana Haynes travel to Smith's Grove's Sanitarium to interview Michael Myers. Dr. Ron Bursarton, who had been treating Michael since Loomis's death, informs them that Michael can speak but chooses not to. Aaron approaches Michael and talks to him, trying to get him to speak. He shows him his mask, which seems to spark an interest in Michael. He can feel it. Aaron tries to get Michael to speak while all the other prisoners surrounding Michael go wild. He keeps trying to get Michael Michael to speak. After Aaron and Dana fail to get him to speak, they then go to interview Laurie. After she opens the gates for them to enter, it's revealed she has spent the last 40 years dealing with PTSD and preparing for Michael's inevitable return. Her feelings have resulted in 2 failed marriages and losing custody of her daughter Karen at a young age, who would later have a daughter of her own, Allison, with their history inflicting stress on the family. Aaron and Dana tell Laurie their interest in finding out why Michael committed the murders and ask her to meet with him in a final attempt to get him to speak before he is transferred to a maximum security prison. Laurie declines and gets them to leave. Sometime later, Allison talks to Laurie, asks why Laurie can't get over it and that she needs to get over Michael so she can finally rejoin the family. Patients are slowly but surely loaded onto a bus transport and Laurie prepares herself in case Michael escapes said bus. Dr. Sarton insists on accompanying Michael and is allowed inside. Laurie arrives at the family dinner for the first time in forever. She's very clearly stressed out and eventually leaves. Later that night, a man and his son come across a bus crash with the bodies of the prisoners and guards outside and inside the bus. The son shoots Dr. Sarton in fear and runs back to the truck. Michael appears in the back seat and snaps the son's neck. The following morning on Halloween, Michael finds Aaron and Dana at the grave of Judith Myers. Aaron and Dana go to the gas station for Dana to go to the bathroom. Michael walks inside the bathroom and opens the stalls, and keeps walking until he reaches her stall, and he begins to terrorize Dana. Aaron finds that the workers of the gas station have all been murdered, and Aaron goes to the bathroom to check on Dana. Michael drops a bunch of teeth in her stall, and she begins crawling away. She screams as he grabs her, and she tries to run away. Aaron arrives, notices Michael, and hits Michael over the head with a crowbar before his head is thrown into the bathroom stall. Michael uses Aaron to break into the stall, tosses the mortally wounded Aaron aside, and pins Dana against the wall, choking her until he breaks her neck, which kills her. All while Aaron is bleeding to death out of the side of his head. Michael opens their car and recovers his mask. He puts it on and feels powerful once more. Michael Myers is truly back. Laurie learns about the crash and instantly locks her doors and goes to break into Karen's house to demonstrate her lack of security, causing an argument between Karen and her husband Ray. The police find the bodies and see Laurie. They know this is Michael's doing. Beginning that night, Michael wanders Haddonfield, blending in perfectly with the trick-or-treaters. He goes into someone's yard, grabs a hammer, and begins to prepare to kill innocent victims. After the murder, he finds a knife and walks towards a baby, but luckily moves on, continuing to wander the street. He wastes no time and moves to another house, finds another woman and stabs the knife directly through her throat. Meanwhile, Allison is at a party with her friends and receives a call from Vicky, inviting her to come over once Julian, the boy she's babysitting, falls asleep and her boyfriend Dave arrives. Vicky and Julian talk back and forth and she tucks him into bed. Allison, however, gets into an altercation with her boyfriend Cameron, who throws her phone just as Laurie was calling to warn her to go home. Dave arrives at Vicky's, and the two of them cuddle for a while. They hear a noise and Dave goes to investigate, to which Julian jumps out of nowhere and yells about someone in his room. Dave goes outside to smoke while Vicky is tucking Julian back in bed. He goes to their shed and sees that the door is open. Inside, Vicky goes to close the closet door, but she can't shut it. Michael, who is hiding in Julian's closet, pushes her away, and she tries to defend herself, but Michael fatally stabs Vicky multiple times. Julian flees as Dave grabs a knife to fight Michael. Laurie, patrolling the streets in her truck, hears the dispatch call on the CB radio and hurries to the house. Sheriff Frank Hawkins is investigating the house and finds Vicky's dead body. Laurie and Michael see each other and Laurie shoots him, and Frank sees Michael as he walks away. Frank sees Dave's dead body, and while looking around, Laurie shoots Michael, but as she turns the corner, Michael is gone. A deputy arrives with Dr. Sarton, and Laurie and Hawkins learn that he's Michael's new psychiatrist. Laurie tells Hawkins that she has prayed for Michael's escape so that she could kill him once and for all. Allison leaves her boyfriend at the party and allows Oscar to walk her home, while Hawkins and Dr. Sarton drive around to find Michael. Laurie and the police arrive at Karen and Roy's house to tell them about Michael and find Allison. Oscar randomly makes an advance to Allison, but she rejects his advances, and Oscar sits behind in shame. Oscar spots Michael watching him. The lights turn off as Oscar gets up, and when they turn back on, Michael's gone. They turn back on and he attacks Oscar. Oscar tries to escape but is caught on the fence and Michael stabs him and then impales him. Allison runs back and sees Oscar, and then Michael appears. Allison runs and is chased by Michael before finding refuge in a neighboring home. Laurie, Karen, and Ray arrive at Laurie's fortified home and wait for Allison to arrive as two officers are posted outside of the house in their squad car. Hawkins and Dr. Sarton search for Michael and in turn find Allison. Laurie, Karen, and Ray go into the basement and Laurie begins preparing them all, while Hawkins, Dr. Sarton, and Allison eventually find Michael, and Hawkins drives quickly and runs him over with a police SUV. He wastes no time and gets out of the vehicle to shoot Michael at point blank range. despite Dr. Sartan's protest. Dr. Sartan stabs Hawkins in the throat with a blade hidden inside a pen and kills him before taking Michael's mask and putting it on. Dr. Sartan puts Michael into the back of the vehicle with Allison and drives to Laurie's house, intent on reuniting them. Allison informs Dr. Sartan that Michael spoke to her, but distracted by demanding to know what Michael said, Michael is able to break through the security barrier, forcing Dr. Sartan out of the vehicle, and Allison flees on foot as Michael looks to Dr. Sartan, who wants Michael to say something to him. But Michael stomps on his head. Other officers go and check out why the police car is stopped randomly on the road and discover Dr. Sartan's body, although Michael is behind them and they don't even know. Allison runs in the woods towards their house, but Ray sees the officers on camera and hears the sirens briefly, so he decides to step outside to check if there's any word on Allison, but he opens the police car door to find them dead. Michael appears behind Ray and strangles them. Ray shoots to alert the rest, but Michael overpowers him, killing him. Laurie looks outside and sees Michael. She alerts Karen to Michael's arrival and sends her into the hidden safe room. Laurie waits for him and Michael attempts to enter the house. He tries to kill her immediately, but Laurie is able to aim and shoot 2 of Michael's fingers off. Laurie turns on all the lights on the outside of the house and waits downstairs with Karen. The hatchet opens and Laurie goes upstairs. Laurie goes searching for Michael and finds Roy lying dead inside a closet. She continues her search. Michael appears and rushes to her, trying to choke her, and she tries to stab him, but he grabs the knife and slashes her. She bites his fingers and he pushes her off the balcony. Michael looks at her from the top. Allison arrives at the house and Michael hears this, but when he looks back to the ground, Laurie is gone. Karen hears Allison and unlocks the safe room for Allison to head down. Michael looks around, trying to find out where they are. He tries to shake it out of the way, but it doesn't move. He tries more and more, but Karen grabs a gun and loads it. Michael gets it open but doesn't appear yet, knowing that they can just shoot him. Karen whimpers and cries that she can't do it, she can't shoot him, and she can't fight back. So Michael appears. Gotcha. Karen shoots him with a rifle and stuns him. Laurie appears from the shadows and attacks Michael. Michael fights back, but Laurie is able to send him tumbling down the steps into the safe room. Karen and Allison leave the safe room, but Michael gets back up and grabs Karen's ankle. Allison stabs Michael with his own knife multiple times until he lets go, and Karen kicks his face down and the two escape the room. Laurie flips the switch and metal bars spring into place, barricading the exit and trapping Michael in the safe room as it fills with gas. Laurie lights a flare and tosses it through the bars, saying goodbye to Michael, setting the room and Michael ablaze. The entire house lights on fire to ensure Michael's demise. Laurie, Karen and Allison escape and they hitch a ride in the back of a pickup truck coming down the road. The house is engulfed in flames, but Michael is nowhere to be seen. After leaving the party, Cameron calls the deceased Oscar just to be left on voicemail. He walks to a fence and sees the wounded Frank Hawkins with blood coming out of his neck. As Cameron runs to Hawkins' aid, he jolts back up while Cameron tries to help, and Frank tells Cameron he needs to die, and I'm the one who's gonna kill him. Tommy Doyle celebrates the 40th anniversary of Michael Myers' imprisonment with his longtime friends and survivors of the attacks, Marion Chambers, Lindsay Wallace, and Cameron's dad, Lonnie Ellum. Meanwhile, after their confrontation with Michael, Laurie Strode, her daughter Karen, and her granddaughter Allison are horrified when they see the firefighters heading to the burning Strode residence. Laurie screams, "Let him burn," but they go in to control the fire. One firefighter falls into the basement where he sees Michael, who kills the firefighter. Another firefighter offers his hand, not knowing where he is, only for Michael to grab it. The firefighters freeze as Michael walks outside the burning building. The firefighters grab axes and anything they can use, preparing to fight the monster. Michael single-handedly murders the firefighters one by one, using their own chainsaw against them. Michael wins. Karen and Allison, however, submit Laurie to emergency surgery to repair her damaged organs. Elsewhere, an elderly couple is relaxing and having fun until they hear something. They go to investigate and Michael scares them. Michael breaks through the window and slams the old man's head against the window before killing him. The woman calls the police before Michael stares at her, walking to a light, breaking it and preparing to use it to kill her. He finishes the old man, who was barely alive, with multiple different knives for fun, while the woman watches. Michael then walks away. The police find the firefighters dead, and an emergency alert informs Tommy, Marion, Lindsay, and Lonnie of Michael's escape. Vanessa goes outside to get in her car, hearing heavy breathing, and encounters Michael in the backseat of her car. She runs back into the bar to gather everyone, and they prepare to fight him. Tommy and the others walk to confront Michael as the car turns on. Tommy hits the window, but Michael drives away and crashes. But before they reach the car, Michael has already left. A gay couple who now lives in Michael Myers' home is celebrating Halloween, until a girl arrives saying her friend is bleeding. Another kid rushes inside and comes back out, proving to the couple it was all a joke. They tell the kids the story of Michael, and they all rush away scared. Karen and Allison tell the police all the information they can, and when they tell the officers about how they finished Michael, they are informed of Michael's escape. Cameron invites Allison to join him and his father to hunt down Michael, and Karen insists they don't go. Allison wraps up and puts the knife she used to stab Michael next to Laurie, in case he comes. Tommy and Lonnie gather all the weapons they have and more people to come over to help. They go and warn everyone to go inside, and those who have the strength to help fight to join him to hunt and kill Myers. Lindsay goes over to kids who are out having fun, and the kids tell them how a man in a mask is playing hide and seek with them. Michael is here, so she gets them to run away. Marion, Lindsay, Vanessa, and her husband Marcus are attacked by Michael. He jumps on their car and starts to terrorize them. Lindsay gathers rocks in a bag to throw at him while Vanessa is taken out of the car. They all struggle while fighting off Michael. One of their guns jammed and Michael starts to kill. He kills every single one of them in the car, and Vanessa tries firing at Michael but misses, only for Michael to push the car door to knock the gun to her face, and she shoots herself by accident. He looks at all their dead bodies, and Lindsay comes over to attack him. He strangles her, but she starts to take his mask off. He repositions it as she runs away. Michael follows her as she keeps running. He loses her, looking around trying to find her. Michael walks away to keep searching. Back at the hospital, Laurie wakes up and Karen learns Allison has gone away to go fight. Karen is keeping the information that Michael is alive from Laurie to keep her calm. Frank is moved into the same ward as her. Tommy, Lonnie, Cameron, and Allison find Lindsay's car, and they start searching the woods only to find their friends dead on the playground. Allison finds Lindsay alive and they all rush to her. At the hospital, Laurie and Frank talk to each other about everything that's happened. Tommy takes Lindsay to the hospital, and Tommy yells to everyone there that Michael Myers dies tonight. Evil dies tonight. Tommy runs in and tells Laurie that he's alive. Laurie tells Karen how the system failed, and she leaves her bed to go and stab herself with pain medication. She tells Karen how Michael dies when she dies. They die together. Back at Michael's childhood home, the gay couple hears noises from outside. They go to check the front door, but when they check if the back door is locked, it's open, and there's a bloody handprint on the wall. They prepare themselves with knives as they lock their doors. Back at the hospital, escaped convict Anthony Tivoli yells out loud and they think it's Michael, and the convict is chased by Tommy's mob. Back at the childhood home, they're still looking for the man in their house. Michael appears out of nowhere and attacks, killing one of them through their eyes. The other comes upstairs saying, "Michael, you've come home," as Michael heads towards him. At the hospital, they realize it's not him, but when they see Laurie is the one in pain, the sheriff begins to join the hunt thinking it is him. They all start trying to get up the stairwell, still thinking it's him. Karen rushes up the stairwell and knows the escaped convict is in there, so she tries to calm him down and locks him in a room so he can't be hurt. But to avoid being harassed by the Haddonfield citizens, Tivoli faces the difficult decision, being trapped by both sides, and when they start breaking the window, Tivoli breaks the window in front of him, and not knowing any other options, he jumps off the hospital window and commits suicide. They finally realize that it's not Michael Myers. Lonnie, Allison, and Cameron realize Michael is going back home, so they decide to head directly there. Tommy and Karen prepare to hunt him as well. At Michael's childhood home, Lonnie heads in alone. They hear a gunshot, so Allison and Cameron follow. They walk inside and look for Lonnie. They hear someone upstairs and go up only to find the gay couple's bodies. Cameron looks up and finds Lonnie's body in the attic, as Michael comes out and slashes Cameron with a knife. Allison grabs her shotgun and fires. Michael hits it out the way and Allison fights bravely with her knife, but he pushes her down the stairs and she breaks her leg. Michael then finishes Cameron and heads to Allison. He starts coming down the stairs, but Michael turns to Cameron and snaps his head. Michael continues down and Allison fights, but Karen appears and stabs Michael with a pitchfork. He looks at her, but she kicks his head in. She removes his mask and he tries to get up. She faces Michael in his eyes and taunts him, so Michael starts to head towards Karen as she runs away. Michael follows, wanting to retrieve his mask from her, but she keeps running as he keeps following. The mask is left on the ground and Karen successfully lures Michael to Tommy's mob down the street. Police cars arrive and the mob circles him. Michael grabs his mask and puts it on, preparing to fight for his life. He looks to everyone as he's swarmed by the mob. One by one he's beaten, but he takes out a few. He gets shot down to the ground and they beat him over and over again. Karen watches happily as Michael is beaten and slowly killed. Karen herself heads over, and as Michael aims to grab his knife, she picks it up and looks at him in the eyes as she delivers the final blow with the knife. The mob begins to disperse and congratulate themselves on their win, but when they go to ensure his death and prepare to shoot him directly in the head, Michael gets up and slits Brackett's throat. He then kills the mob one by one, over and over. He kills all of them, every single one. Tommy prepares to fight him and get his revenge, but Tommy is attacked by Michael, who stares him in the eyes. Michael then grabs his baseball bat and finishes the job, killing Tommy. At Michael's childhood home, Karen heads upstairs and goes to his sister Judith's room. Looking out the window, she breathes in relief that Michael is gone. But Michael appears and stabs her. Laurie seemingly feels this happen as Michael takes one final victim this Halloween and kills Karen. He looks outside his sister's window like he did so many years ago and breathes heavily. He's nowhere near finished.
Michael is back. And he's more dangerous. He's been watching me. Just like the first time.
What are you gonna do when Michael comes back for you? Because he is coming.
I know you're here. Come and get me. I finally know how to stop him.
What, are you insane? You're not gonna rest until you finish it, or until everybody else is dead.
I got you, you psycho!
No more waiting. No more running.
You started it!
And tonight, I will finish it.